On the dark night of August 8, 1963, a Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London. In one particular carriage of this train were bags filled with banknotes, which, according to today's value, would amount to approximately £67 million. The train driver, Jack Mills, was speeding through the darkness of the night. Suddenly, at a crossing, the signal light turned red. For the driver, this was completely unusual because at that time and at that location, a red signal made no sense at all. Nevertheless, Jack Mills immediately applied the brakes and brought the train to a halt on the desolate track. For a few moments, complete silence fell all around. But behind this silence was hidden a master plan that was about to carry out the biggest robbery of the century, the Great Train Robbery, in which the train itself was stolen. Viewers, this sounds like the plot of a movie. But in real life too, the robbers carried out extremely suspenseful planning and looted millions of pounds from Britain's government train, and that too without firing a single shot. Everything began several months earlier when some well-known criminals in London sat together to plan a new heist. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind behind the plan, along with a few of his associates, began crafting an extraordinary robbery. He had obtained secret information about the Royal Mail. This secret came to him from a senior security officer of the Royal Mail itself, a person whose name remains unknown to this day. The information was that the Glasgow to London train carried a special carriage known as the High Value Packages or HVP carriage. On a particular day, a very large amount of cash was going to be transported in it, and that was the carriage they intended to rob. Bruce Reynolds and his associates were certainly famous criminals, but none of them had any experience in robbing trains. Therefore, they brought in another London gang that did have experience in train robberies. This notorious gang was known as the South Coast Raiders. Gradually, the team grew, and eventually more than 15 people became part of the plan. They were determined to rob the government train without firing a single shot. This was no ordinary robbery of just stopping a train and looting it. Months of meticulous planning went into it. On the evening of August 7, 1963, at 6:50 p.m., the train departed from Glasgow Central Station for London. It was scheduled to arrive at London Euston Station the next morning at 4 a.m. The train had a total of 12 carriages, and 72 post office workers were on board to sort the mail during the journey. This train was specially run to deliver parcels and post to various cities without stopping. Whenever it passed a station, the local post office staff would hang mail bags on a special elevated rack. As the train slowly passed the platform, the staff inside would catch the bags with the help of a net, and at the same time drop off the bags meant for that station, all without the train coming to a complete stop. The carriage that was to be robbed was not yet attached to the train. It was safely parked at Ledburn Railway Station. This carriage was called the HVP High Value Packages because it usually carried very large amounts of cash that people had sent as money orders to other cities. In 1960, 3 years before this incident, the Post Office Investigation Branch had recommended installing security alarm systems in HVP carriages to improve security. By 1961, 3 HVP carriages were fitted with alarms, and the older carriages without alarms were kept in reserve. But on the day of the robbery, the most crucial day, all 3 alarm-fitted HVP carriages were out of service. So a reserve carriage, M3024M, without any security system, was used instead. This was a massive tip provided to the robbers by an insider from the Royal Mail. When the train from Glasgow reached Ledburn Station, the railway staff attached the HVP carriage immediately behind the engine, the second position. This was the first tip the robbers received. But the second tip was even more important. Normally, an HVP carriage carried around £300,000 in cash. But because the previous week had been a bank holiday weekend, on the day of the robbery, the carriage was carrying approximately £3 million in cash. That was tip number 2. In other words, the coincidence that happened that day probably occurred only once in many years. 12 times more money than usual, and by chance the alarm-equipped carriage was out of service. But for the robbers, this was no coincidence. They had been planning for this exact day for months. Anyway, the train, now with the HVP carriage attached, departed from Ledburn. It was already night, and 58-year-old driver Jack Mills was speeding toward his destination. Nearby, the robbers' group was lying in wait, hidden in the bushes beside the track. Their planning was perfect. Around 3 a.m. on August 8, 1963, one of the robbers tampered with the signal at Sears Crossing. He covered the green light with a glove and powered a fake red light using a battery. Then everyone hid and waited for the train. When the train approached Sears Crossing, the driver was shocked to see the red light because normally Royal Mail trains were never stopped at this crossing. Still, Jack Mills applied the brakes and stopped the train right at the signal. Suddenly, silence enveloped everything. At that moment, the assistant driver, also called the second man, got down to contact the signalman using the line-side telephone. When he picked up the phone, he discovered the line had been cut, part of the robbers' plan. As the second man turned to go back to the engine, robbers emerged from the bushes and captured him. Some robbers climbed onto both sides of the engine and tried to overpower the driver. When Jack Mills resisted, one robber struck him on the head with an iron bar, and he fell unconscious in the driver's seat. The robbers had come fully prepared. While the chaos was happening in the engine, other team members detached the engine and the first two carriages, including the HVP, from the rest of the train. Their plan was to take the engine and the valuable carriages away from the main train. But where to? About 1 kilometer from Sears Crossing was Berdego Bridge, where the robbers' trucks were waiting. They had also brought along a retired railway driver whose job was to drive the train to Berdego Bridge. Everything up to this point went exactly according to plan. But now came the first real problem. The retired driver they brought panicked when he saw the controls of this new engine. He had never operated this type before. Left with no choice, the robbers revived Jack Mills and forced him to drive the train the remaining 1 kilometer. The engine and 2 carriages moved again and were stopped at Berdego Bridge. During this time, the staff in the remaining carriages at the back had no idea why the train had stopped. At Berdego Bridge, the robbers broke open the doors of the HVP carriage, entered, assaulted 5 staff members, tied them up face down with ropes, and began the robbery. Inside the HVP carriage were a total of 128 mailbags stuffed with cash, £1, £5, and 10-shilling notes. The total weight was about 2.5 tons. The train was on the bridge, and below on the road stood a truck. According to the plan, they had only 15 minutes. So they formed a human chain and loaded 120 out of 128 bags into the truck. The remaining 8 bags were left behind due to lack of time. Their plan had worked almost perfectly. But in the end, one small mistake was made, a mistake that later became the biggest reason for their capture. While leaving, one robber told the tied-up staff, "Don't even try to move from here for the next 30 minutes, or you'll lose your lives." The robbers had an Austin Lodestar truck in which all the cash was loaded, along with 2 Land Rovers, both bearing the same fake number plate BMG 757 to mislead witnesses. After the crime, they all fled. After about 45 minutes of driving, at 4:30 a.m., they reached their hideout, which was around 43 kilometers away near the village of Oakley. During the drive, they were also listening to police communications on a VHF radio, which helped them a lot. By the time they reached the hideout, the police had also learned about the robbery. But for the moment, they were overjoyed. At the hideout, they celebrated wildly. They even played Monopoly using the real stolen banknotes. But this happiness lasted only a few minutes. Soon they heard on the radio that the police were searching for them within a 50 kilometers radius. The 50 kilometers idea came from the staff statement about the 30 minutes warning. The police correctly calculated that in 30 minutes the robbers couldn't have gone farther than about 50 kilometers. Hearing this, the gang panicked. Their original plan to leave on Sunday was brought forward to Friday. On Thursday, they divided all the money among themselves. The total loot was approximately £2.5 million. According to some reports, each member received around £150,000, a huge sum in those days, equivalent to roughly £3.9 million in today's money per person. The rest was distributed among smaller helpers. Before Friday, they wiped their fingerprints from every surface in the hideout and assigned one person the task of burning the place down after they left so no evidence would remain. That person took the money but fled without setting the fire. Meanwhile, police were searching the entire Buckinghamshire area. Helicopters circled overhead, police vehicles patrolled everywhere, and national media was in an uproar. The police even announced a £10,000 reward for information. A neighbor of the hideout came forward and told police that on the morning of August 8th there had been a lot of unusual activity. On suspicion, police immediately raided the hideout, a farmhouse the gang had rented 3 months earlier. Police found plenty of evidence: empty mailbags, mail items, and a truck that had been hastily painted yellow. Although the robbers had wiped most fingerprints, some remained on the Monopoly board they had played with real money. These fingerprints became the biggest breakthrough in the case because all of them already had criminal records. They matched police and Scotland Yard records, and the real culprits were identified. Within a few days, 14 out of the 16 robbers were arrested. Only 2 escaped. One was the replacement train driver whose real name was never discovered, and the other was the Royal Mail senior security officer who had provided the crucial inside information. To this day, no one knows his name or face. He never revealed himself. The court described this as the robbery of the century and sentenced almost all members of the gang to 30 years in prison. After this robbery, Borrego Bridge became famously known as Train Robbers Bridge, a name that is still informally used today. Jack Mills, the 58-year-old driver, suffered serious head injuries and was never able to work as a driver again. 7 years later, he passed away due to the trauma. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and share it. See you in the next amazing video.